Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest. Actually, Scott, can you tell me where you're calling out of?
Hello, I'm calling out of Pensacola, Florida. That's Northwest Florida. Really hot and humid here today. But night has come upon us, so it's cooling off a little bit. And I'm just ready to dig in, see what's going on.
And Ben, can I ask where you're calling out of us?
I'm in Tebek, which is a city in Gangwon province up in the East Coast Mountains of Korea.
And can you tell us really quickly what it is that you do and over there in Tibet?
Well, I'm part of a Christian community called Jesus Abbey that's been a group of people living in community for over 50 years now, coming and going. I was there at the very beginning when we were building. I lived in a tent for 6 months when I was 15.
Wow.
But anyway,
so you quite
for
literally
since 2005, I came back to Korea in 2005 for the purpose of building a training center as a place to prepare for when North Korea opens up to South Koreans.
All right.
The interesting thing is, currently, there are other people from other countries are able to go into North Korea, except for COVID restrictions and the State Department's travel ban for Americans.
Mm-hmm.
But these people are preparing. They're from a variety of different countries, and they're learning Korean, and they're learning about North Korea. So we're involved in that as well. At the same time that we're building this training center to expand that work.
I'm going to put up a picture of myself. I'm going to send it to Harry. And when I went to North Korea, they made us wear these badges. I'm not sure if they did that to you because you lived there, but I think it was because of the travel ban. I'm not sure, but they will not stamp your passport. My sister actually had this in Cuba as well. So what they do is they stamp that piece of paper when you enter, and then they stamp it when you leave. So you get to keep that, which is pretty cool, but you don't get it on your passport. So
that's not related to the U.S. travel ban. That is just North Korea's recognition that there are many countries that won't let you travel to them if you have evidence that you've been in North Korea. So they give you your visa on a separate piece of paper. That's all.
Yes,
it's to protect people.
There's something similar, isn't there, about Iran and Israelis, where Iran offers you a separate for a same kind of deal. I think, offer you.
Or in Israel, if you go to Israel, you get your visa and your stamp on a separate piece of paper. It's not put into your passport.
Right, maybe that's it. Maybe I got it backwards.
Wow.
So when you were saying Tibet, Ben, you said Korea, and I was thinking, is this North or South? You've had this community. I think what you're saying is
South Korea.
Right.
That's good.
Right.
We're gonna get into
I've
this
been in the North.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that discussion in the North, but before we start off, just real quick, Ben, if you could tell us, there's something called a Dawkins scale. Darth Dawkins is as close as you could get. Not Darth Dawkins. Richard Dawkins is as close to a prophet of atheism as you could possibly get. So they say we don't have leaders, we don't have prophets. Well, that guy is pretty much as close to being the president as you can, but he created a scale from 1 to 7 to where 1 being like you absolutely know that God exists. That would be like a Gnostic theist, or a Gnostic atheist would mean that which I don't know how you would, but you know that God doesn't exist. And that would be a 7. So on a scale of 1 through 7, where would you put yourself, Ben?
Okay, well, I was confused by the scale, but I will just simply say, I firmly believe in the existence of God, and I believe my whole life is proof of that.
Right. And so you would say definitely a 1?
If that's the way you explained it, it sounded like you were saying both of them were 7s.
No. Maybe
So
okay.
1 is definitely there is a God, and 7 is definitely there is no.
I'm a 1.
Yeah, right.
Okay. And Scott, real quick,
wouldn't
you're
be
about
here
a 6.
In Korea otherwise.
Yeah, right.
Scott, you're about a 6, real quick.
Yeah. I just have no belief on the matter because I don't know either way. Like I wouldn't believe there is no God either, for the same reason I don't believe there is one.
Or
4, maybe somewhere in the middle. Yeah.
And maybe Harry, I think you said you're like a 6.5, something like that.
I put myself at sort of a 6, something like
6,
that.
okay.
As in, I'm
All right.
fairly confident it's not the case.
Well, that being said, we are going to be talking about North Korea today. I've actually gotten a chance to go there on a couple occasions, but they were very, very small visits. Ben has actually lived there for some time, so we're going to talk a little bit about that, and some also about the implications of atheism and whether or not that's influencing what's going on there in the north. So, are you guys ready?
Absolutely.
Everybody ready? Okay. Well, you know what? So I don't take this over. Why don't I kick it off to Harry, and then Harry, you get in this.
Right. So I don't want to. I don't want to make the conversation sort of push the conversation out of the order that you had it set. But yeah, I'm absolutely fascinated to know what it's like, what North Korea is like, because the most I ever get of sort of Vice videos and a lot of what I presume is probably Western anti-communist, anti-dictatorship propaganda. So yeah, what is it like? Like, do you have any stories that would encapsulate what life is like in North Korea?
Well, it's different for different people. North Koreans tend to be, my experience there, and at that time, it was a time of difficulty. It's not as difficult as it has been at other times. But people were pretty hardworking. People were friendly. People were, they do a lot of singing. Koreans love to sing. They love to sing and dance. And they'll do that at the drop of a hat. There's also a lot of caution. We had an interesting experience. When I was there, it was for 3 months in 2008. I was serving as a food monitor for U.S. food distribution program. We had a team. We had an American team, or actually ours was an international team. And we had a counterpart Korean team. We pretty much always had to travel with our counterparts wherever we went, whatever we did. But they were people, some of them had a lot of experience dealing with Americans. Some of them had actually been in the States.
Really?
On occasion for various diplomatic things. And they were of the elite. They were among the elite. So and they were very, very gracious to us, very friendly to us. But everybody, our side and their side, were generally very careful about what we talked about, except for one person on that team who tended to loosen up when he'd had a few drinks. And every now and then, every now and then things would come out. And we, the Americans, would tell him, be quiet, be quiet. You don't need to say that. And then his other team members would just kind of take him out of the room before he said something that was too much to ignore. Right. So that was an interesting thing.
Yeah, for his own safety, right?
And was there anything interesting at those moments that he let slip? Also, I've got to be mindful. I imagine you also need to be mindful about what you say about North Korea so that, if some censors watch this, they won't stop you from going back in.
Well, I'm not too concerned at this point.
Okay.
Because of the nature of what we're doing. And I'm pretty upfront, pretty honest about my opinions about North Korea.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Would you say that most North Koreans are genuinely patriotic?
Yes. And when I was there, now patriotic I'm not sure that that's really the right word to use.
Brainwash?
But I'll give you, here's a little story. They were having our team, our counterpart team, was putting on a dinner for the person who had been, the American who had been setting up our team and the whole process there. He was retired. He worked with Samaritan's Purse, and he had been there just for a temporary period, and he was returning to the US. Now, he's very much a grandfather figure, and he was very popular. So they had a special dinner for him. One of the younger members of the North Korean, the counterpart team, he was in his 30s, was from the publishing house in Pyongyang. And his job was translating texts from Korean into English and English into Korean for publication in North Korea. And so his command of English was very good. And he was also, very solidly placed in the structure. So he got up, and he also had a wonderful voice. And he loved to do karaoke. And he got up and he started talking to our leader, the grandfatherly figure, talking about how much he appreciated him, how much he loved him, and how much he was going to be missing him, and so on and so forth. And to express this appreciation for him, he wanted to sing a particular song.
Wow.
And he started singing the song. And I was saying, oh, I wonder what this would be. Maybe it's a song about friendship, about comradeship, or something like that. It was a song. It's called, in English, or in Korean, Pyongyang 안녕하시라. It's greetings. Hello, Pyongyang. And it's all about the city of Pyongyang, which is the home of the leader. And because it's special status, it's special place in my heart, because it's the home of the leader. And I thought to myself, my goodness, this guy really is a believer. A real believer. Because he was singing to express his heart's desire, but the greatest expression of that was a song all about Pyongyang was the home of the leader, and because of that, it was the best place under heaven.
That's considered a very beautiful thing.
I want to share a few things about my experience there, and then I want to kick it over to Scott. I'll let you ask a question. But so when I went there, I was an atheist, positively not a believer. When I went there, we wound up getting drunk with some North Korean officials. Man, this is a weird story, because I mean, one thing about like dictatorships, you got to give these guys credit. As far as one thing, these guys have the most badass uniforms I've ever seen. Like,
definitely,
probably the Nazis were the best as far as uniform wise, but the North Korean uniforms, you see them and you're like, wow. Like, you see the Marines and they don't even match. It's like they're the Marine uniforms are pretty ridiculous, but they have these trench coats and these stars and stuff, and we were drinking with them. And I have to try to somewhat separate what I feel about the government. It's so hard to try to separate that from just your average person, because when I think back, like, oh man, like our tour guide, like he genuinely showed me affection there. And I just remember thinking, like, what might my experience have been with this guy had I met him in South Korea? Like, I'm in an environment right now where we could never be friends right now because of just I'm American. But so it's hard to separate that for me, but we did wind up drinking with them. And if you know this about North Korea, you'll know that they cut out the electricity at a certain time. And like, if you look at it from a satellite, it's totally black.
Didn't know
and
that.
Yeah, there's a lot. You look at it, you can see, especially because it's contrast with South Korea, there's 1,000 lights flashing everywhere all the time. It's obnoxious, but they have neon lights everywhere. But the point is that they let us stay out an hour with them drinking. I mean, we were buying them drinks and stuff. They had this honey beer. We got really smashed, but they let us, they're like, we never do this, but we're going to let you like buy alcohol so you can like take it back with you. And they regulate so much stuff there. If I tell you, we'll get into this in a bit, how much they actually regulate there. But yeah, I had an interesting experience there myself, but trying to understand like the anti-Americanism there. Like, if you're an American, you're driving around, you see anti-American propaganda there. It's pretty intimidating, so it's a pretty crazy experience. But Scott, you got a question?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, I think I've seen documentaries and read stuff on North Korea, here and there. So I don't know a whole lot, but from what I understand, that the founder, it's just really odd when you look at dictatorships like that they are cultish. I know we were talking about this before, but very certain religious ideals seem to spring up among the beliefs of the North Koreans, like as far as the leader is sort of like this godly figure, and his son is sort of like doing his will, and they are one ideologically. I don't really know where the current president fits in with that, but I'm sure he'd be listed among the pantheons of the gods of North Korea, so to speak, because they look at him too as a supreme leader and this and that. So I always just wonder, what is your take? Is that more, does that seem like religious fervor to you, Ben, or do you think that that's more mythology that we get?
North Korea is technically an atheist country. I consider it to be one of the most religious countries in the world.
Right.
And the religion is officially called Kim Il-sung-ism.
Wow.
And North Koreans say that Kim Il-sung is our God. Uri Shin Ida. They say that. I've heard them say
That's
that.
theism.
Isn't there some belief that Kim Il-sung isn't dead? That he's moved on to another plane of existence or something?
Okay. They do not believe in, they are materialists. And they do not believe in a spiritual realm. But they do believe in a type of eternal life. And it's what they call political eternal life. And so Kim Il-sung is officially the eternal president of North Korea. And that was a change in the constitution made after he died.
Wow.
So they have his body embalmed, and Kim Jong-il is there as well in the Palace of the Sun in Pyongyang. They consider that he continues to live, and you'll see slogans talking about he's with us eternally. But it's not what we would think of as being a metaphysical or a spiritual reality. It is a political reality, which to the North Korean ideology is supreme. And so a person attains this type of eternal life or everlasting life through being appreciated by the nation, through the things he does for the nation.
Wow.
And this is why there are names. There's a province, a county in North Korea is named for his father. And there's a county named for his mother. That's part of the way it is. The people who are the heroes of the revolution, who were his compatriots when he was in China or in Russia, they have things named after them. So that naming is a way that it carries on. You might say that what it is maintaining the memory in the people. Now, the people are an entity, and the leader is the head of the people. And so they talk about the whole Korean nation as a single entity, and he's the head. So as long as the entity honors him, he has everlasting life.
Right.
And that's available for people if they will serve the leader and serve the people that way.
And so when you were on that food program, I think you said you were monitoring a food program. If you'd have talked to somebody and said, "Oh, I believe in Jesus," would have been, I'm guessing, a seditious act then? That would have been, they would have come down on you.
Not for me.
Okay.
Because I'm not Korean.
They
actually, when we would gather with our team, they would ask for a meal. They would ask me to say grace. Please say your prayer. And they would be quiet. They wouldn't say amen, but they would be quiet, respectful while I said a prayer for the meal. I conducted Sunday services. They were not allowed to participate in the services, but I was not prevented from doing that for our team. So there was a recognition that we are not Koreans, and therefore we do not need to worship the supreme leader. Now, there are other things, though, that were interesting. There was, I had one experience on a previous trip where I was in a hotel, and I came out of the hotel. The hotel rooms are basically a room and then a a lobby with a bathroom and a place to put your shoes and some cabinets. And you take off your shoes when you go into the room. So you go in the door, you take off your shoes, you go into the room. Well, I came out about 6 o'clock in the morning. I was looking down the hallway, and way down the hallway, there were a lot of shoes in the hall outside of the room. And so I was curious, what are those shoes doing there? It doesn't make sense. So I got down and I heard singing inside the room. And I realized it was the morning devotional for all the staff in the hotel. And they were all gathered and they were singing hymns to the leader. And the reason there were shoes in the hallway is because there were so many people in the room that they filled up the lobby with their shoes. And these were the spillover. And then another time, when I was there on the food program, another member of our team who handled our money went down into the basement of the hotel where we stayed. The basement was off limits to us. We could go outside the hotel and anywhere else, but we weren't allowed to go into the basement unless we had one of our counterparts with us. And so he had to go down because that's where the safe was and that's where the money was stored. So he was getting some money. And he told me that what he saw. And as he went down the stairs, there was a room, and every place, every factory, every school, every hotel has a study room. That's what they call it. And it's where you study the ideology. And the door was open in the study room. And there were people inside, and some were studying, reading their notebooks. But there was a woman in the corner. She had her eyes closed and her lips were moving. My friend looked at her and realized she was praying. She was praying to the leader.
Wow. So
it's an extremely religious society.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Very much.
Ben, let me ask you a quick question. Because I have heard, maybe from what you tell me that doesn't sound like it was true, but I've heard that they actually have like churches there that are filled, like they have like a Christian church for like the foreign aid workers, and they send some Koreans there just to like fill the pews. Is that true?
Okay, there are in Pyongyang 2 Protestant churches, a Russian Orthodox, and a Roman Catholic. These are built by the government, built by the authorities.
What?
The smaller Protestant church is actually built by Kim Il-sung as a tribute to his mother, because it was in his mother's village and she was a leader in the church. And so he built this as a tribute to her. But the people now don't know that. But we know that historically. Anyway, the people who attend this church are North Koreans, but they are North Koreans who have been vetted by the government, made sure that they are safe to attend. And the whole purpose of this is not to provide places of worship for foreigners, but it's to demonstrate that they have freedom of religion in North Korea. Because the Constitution requires freedom of religion.
Okay. Now, thank you for clarifying.
I had a very close friend, very senior. He actually passed away in South Korea just 2 years ago. The second anniversary was just about a week ago. He very interesting person. He taught in North Korea, and I won't go into his whole story, but he administered the final exam for Kim Jong-il. He taught the nephew of Kim Il-sung. He was a tutor in the family of the leader. And because of the experiment they were doing, they changed some things about the education program because of what this man had demonstrated was possible. He ended up coming to the States in the 90s, came into South Korea early 90s, and to the States, became a US citizen. And he was very much involved in translating the Bible into North Korean, Pyongyang Korean. So the Bibles that they have now in North Korea or in South Korea are really not in the North Korean language. So they're very difficult for North Koreans to understand them.
Mm.
So he was dead set on providing a North Korean translation, and he succeeded in doing the New Testament before he passed away.
Wow.
But he told me this, that he had actually tried to get his wife to become a member of the Pongsu Church, the big Protestant church in Pyongyang. And she was on a waiting list. And the reason that they wanted to become members, because if they were members and they got extra rations so that they looked healthier to the foreign dignitaries or reporters. Or
Wow.
So much of what they do there seems like it's theater. Like this is reminding me of the Vice documentary where they sort of they go to sit down for dinner and they're forced to wait for like an hour while they lay out these feasts on all these other tables before they then serve the actual people their food, because they want to make this show of, we've got plenty of food, look how much food we've got, we just put it on tables.
Oh, I experienced that myself.
Go on, tell us
Very much so. So people who go to church, who are members of the church, are trained at how to respond to pray, how to pray, when to say hallelujah, when to say amen.
Oh my God.
On the face and everything. And it's definitely a theater. Now, the interesting thing,
so fascinating.
There was a Methodist, a South Korean American Methodist pastor who made a number of trips to North Korea. And he was always filming the people at the church. He would attend the Pongsu church. And he saw over time how some of the people's faces, some people changed, but others did not. And the conclusion that he came to, there's other reasons for this conclusion too, is that those were people who had developed genuine faith from reading the Bible, from singing the hymns. And it was now dangerous for them, and they were removed and replaced by others who had
So you're allowed to, you sign up to go to a church, you got to be on a waiting list to get there, and partly because you get extra rations, you're taught all of the prayers and the hallelujah and all of this business. But if you start to believe, they out of there and they're replaced with somebody
out of there
who can
if
do
there's
all
evidence, if there's evidence that you're actually
That is
that's
okay.
It's not funny. That's not funny. Why am I laughing? That's awful experience.
I got to share with you guys something, because after I got back from North Korea, so I went in there as an atheist, and that really stopped me and how to make me evaluate my atheistic thoughts, because I had a hard time reconciling what I was seeing and knowing that it was wrong. Like, I just felt the evilness when I was there, just something that just looms in that country. It's just positively evil. And so I didn't become a Christian as a result of that. That didn't happen till probably like 7 years later, but it just put a crack in the ceiling, like, do I really believe this? So
what
when
was
I got
about
back,
the evilness that put a crack in the atheism?
well, because okay, so I tried to evaluate this. If I did believe in evolution, I did believe in survival of the fittest, then Kim Jong-il at the time, this is before he died, was just shearing these North Korean people like you would shear a sheep or a chicken. Like he's using them as I would use an animal. So I had to say, what exactly, like, what grounding can I use to say that this is wrong? And I couldn't reconcile. I'm not saying you guys can, or atheists or bad people. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it caused a level of cognitive dissonance. Anyway, I got back to South Korea, and I just happened to be in a public bathhouse one day, and they have like these sweating rooms. And I just happened to run into the minister of like culture's wife there. And we struck up a conversation. I told her I went to North Korea, and they had just came from like this North Korean organization. So that they were helping the refugees there. So what happened is I started to like volunteer. We were teaching them English. We were doing clothing drives. And actually I made like a bunch of interviews with one of the guys on there. It's on my Mokpo Missions YouTube and website. But I was helping this guy out financially and with food and stuff, because they come here. We'll talk about one of that, why it's so difficult for North Koreans to come to South Korea as refugees, even if they do escape. And he told me that, I remember this, I'll get chills just thinking about this. But he goes, Isaiah, he goes, I positively know that everything my government told me was wrong. This guy's a Christian now, mind you. He's become a Christian. He goes, I know everything they said was an absolute lie. He says, I know that. But he says, the anti-Americanism that they ingrained inside of me, he's like, I have a hard time letting that go. And he goes, I know you care about me and my family, and you've done a lot to help us. But he's like, that's, I have a hard time. He's like, I remember his time, and I could not wrap my mind around that. Because he did genuinely see how much I was giving him and helping him out. But he didn't want that, like for instance, I grew up like really poor Mexican on the east side. So even these days, like, I might pocket some like sugars from like Starbucks or something when I go out there, because like if you're raised in the lack, there's things you do. Like the ghetto-ness is hard for me to even when I made tons of money, I'm like, why am I stealing this toothbrush? Like, why am I taking these things? I'm like, I have thousands of dollars. Why am I doing this? Like, it just gets ingrained inside of you,
Yeah.
So
So were you saying while he was still in North Korea, he was like, I know that everything the government tells me is wrong, or now that I'm out, I can look back and realize it was all wrong?
Well, you could watch, you could watch the interviews that I did with him, because the story of how he escaped is just like, he literally had to live a year in the embassy. But I mean, you wouldn't believe some of the stuff that this guy told me. I mean, he literally tells stories about seeing people hunt others and shoot them and like and eat them. He told me this one story about being invited over to someone's house, and the guy having a pot and like opening it up and him seeing a body in there.
You're talking about a period. It's called the Arduous March.
Yeah.
And where there was tremendous starvation, and possibly 100,000 people, or maybe more, starved to death. It was an extreme situation. But let me share something that is not as quite as shocking, if you will, but illustrates the sort of thing that your friend was telling you. The person that I was telling you about, his name is Professor Kim. Professor Kim was among the elite in North Korea. He had access to the home of Kim Il-sung, and he gave the final exam to Kim Jong-il when he graduated from college. He was personal friends with Hwang Jang-yeop. Hwang Jang-yeop is the highest level defector.
Yeah.
To leave North Korea. He was the one who literally wrote the book on Juche, the philosophy of self.
Look at that here. That's the atheist right there.
The philosophy of self-reliance. It's not individual self-reliance as we think about it, but it's collective nationalist self-reliance. And that's the foundation of what we call Kim Il-sungism, or what the North Koreans call Kim Il-sungism. He came to South Korea and he became an ardent defender of capitalism. And he gave lectures and he wrote about the evils of socialism, about the North Korean philosophy and so forth. He had to live under special guard because there are a number of attempts to assassinate him by North Korean agents. I met him shortly before he died. I had an interview, and I was introduced to him by someone, a friend of his, and he said this. He said that capitalism is the only answer to socialism. Socialism is evil, that the central planning that it requires is evil, and he had a lot of reason. I can talk about that too. He says the answer to it is free market capitalism. But there is a problem with capitalism. Capitalism has no moral foundation. And it needs a moral foundation or it becomes corrupt. And the best moral foundation for capitalism is Christianity.
Mm.
So that's what he told me. He did not profess to be a Christian at that time. I believe he may have before he died, but I'm not sure. I was talking about this with Professor Kim one time, and Professor Kim says, yeah, I know what you're talking about. And Professor Kim was in the US and Hwang Jung-yup was in South Korea, but they would communicate by phone or whatever was the technology available to them at the time. And he said, yeah, I keep telling him he needs to become a believer in Jesus. He needs to become a Christian. And his response is, I know, but there's still too much Juche up here.
Oh.
So I'm not able to believe. He had rejected Juche. He had talked about the falseness of it. The whole materialism and how it led to evil and so forth. But it was still so much in him from his growing up,
Mm-hmm.
the way he was raised, that he was not able to embrace the supernatural required to believe in Jesus. Professor Kim had a similar struggle as well. And he had, his own story is quite similar. What happened to him to drastically change his perspective and to open him up to understanding the metaphysical or accepting a spiritual reality. Part of that I was actually involved with. There was a woman, an older American woman, who had a dream. And in her dream, there was an Oriental man teaching children. And she felt there was something very special about this, and she was drawn to him, and she thought he was Chinese. As I got to know her and talked about North Korea, actually, she realized that this dream that she had was probably a North Korean.
Mm.
And then later on, I arranged for the two of them to meet, Professor Kim and this woman. And she said, he's the man in my dream.
Wow.
And he asked her, they talked some more, and he said, yes, she really did see me in her dream. And that opened him up to taking another step into believing in the supernatural, believing in the spiritual world.
That's crazy.
But it took an event like that to break through his own worldview. He's still carrying a lot of that Juche materialistic worldview with him.
But that's virtually exactly what I was telling you as far as what he told me, about how he couldn't.
Right.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Okay, I want to ask you a question. What is the greatest challenge when the refugees come to South Korea after they escape that? Then they're trying to be incorporated into society. And I guess there's like stuff like accent and just not understanding internet or banking, things like that. They just do not. It's like if you take like a middle schooler and like, okay, now you got to come and get a job and everything. It just, right. So there's that. Can you speak a little bit about that, please?
There are a lot of practical things like that, but the language issue actually goes much deeper. There are real differences, deep-seated differences between the languages of North Korea and South Korea. And it usually takes a North Korean in South Korea some 3 years before he is able to really understand and communicate fluently. The difference is on several different levels. One level is the level of vocabulary. That is actually rather easy to understand and easy to overcome. But there are a lot of words in North Korea that have been given political meanings. In South Korea, the same words have different meanings because they're not politicized. South Korean has a lot of new vocabulary that doesn't exist in North Korea. North Korea has traditionally and deliberately been very conservative in allowing the language to change and rejecting foreign words. South Korean has a lot of foreign words. The South Korean also has a phenomenon where they create new words. And an example that I use for Korean audience when I'm talking about this, which everybody laughs when I tell them, there's a Korean word called that's dika, and dika means digital camera. And what Koreans often do is they will take the initial syllables of two different words and put them together. So digital camera becomes dika. And Southern California is Nam Ka Ju. Nam is Southern, Ju is state, and Ka is CA. It's California. Nam Ka Ju. That's what all the South Koreans call Southern California. Dika, I'll say Dika is a purely Korean word. It's not used anywhere else in the world. It's made up of two English words. Everybody will laugh and they'll say,
I'm curious to know, what are some of the examples of the one? Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. You were continuing, Ben. I didn't mean.
Yeah. Let me. But once you can realize that there's these vocabulary differences, people can memorize, or they'll realize that this word that I used in one way in North Korea has a different meaning, or this word is no longer used, and so forth. So the vocabulary is not that big an issue. There are also grammatical differences. And those are deliberate. Kim Il-sung went through a period where he wanted Korean language to become more scientific. And so he changed the grammar a little bit, based on Russian grammar, which is more of a Western or Russian language is Slavic language, but it's closer in its grammatical structure to English than some other languages. So Americans studying Korean in North Korea find it much easier to study and comprehend than in South Korea, because in many ways the language has been westernized, you might say. But then there is a third difference, and this is the one that not many people understand, and it's very, very serious. And Professor Kim was the one who pointed it out to me. And he said, it's easier for North Koreans to communicate with Americans than with South Koreans. I said, really? And he said, oh, yeah. I said, even when there's non-fluent, broken language, it's not fluent. Yeah. And the reason is because of the way we use language. North Koreans use language the same way English speakers use language, for direct, factual, materialistic communication. And South Koreans use language primarily to communicate relational knowledge, relational information, rather than practical information. And so North Koreans seem extremely rude to South Koreans because they do not speak around the topic. They come right out and say what they want, just like an American does. South Koreans will forgive Americans because they know that we're a different country. But the other side of it is it's very confusing when a South Korean comes to you with this smile and this long explanation, long sentence with lots of adjectives, finally getting around to what he wants to ask for, or say at the very end. And by then, for me, this was my experience for a number of years. I forgot the beginning of what he said. But the North Koreans have the same problem. They don't understand what South Koreans are saying because they take so long to say it. It's you could, in the southern part of the US, Spanish speaking, so forth, there's a lot more drama to the language. There's a lot more about friendliness and things like that. Whereas in the Northeast, where I came from in Massachusetts originally, and Connecticut, they're very much cut and dried. Yeah. Say that in England, they talk about English. What's the word? I forgot it right now, but just non-expressive.
Yeah, euphemistic. I remember hearing a story of some British troops.
It's a similar sort of thing, and in the Mediterranean cultures, the Spanish cultures, relationship is far more important in your communication, and so there'll be a lot of build up before you get around to talking about the thing you really want to talk about. And that's Harry, the way it is in Korea, even more so in Korea. But the North Koreans are very much like Northerners in the US or the British, where we just say what we're thinking and come right to the point and ask a question.
Interesting.
And so they have a very hard time. It's called social linguistics. And the way you use language, it reflects or controls the way you think, your thought process.
That's so true.
So North Koreans are quick to come to a conclusion, much quicker than a South Korean, in the same way that an English speaker would come to a conclusion quickly and be able to express it quickly.
Harry, can you finish that story, Harry?
Time to express the same idea.
Oh, I just heard a similar thing about the difference between the Americans and the Brits in the war. Or I think it was in the Second World War. Some British soldiers were like, "Oh, we need a bit of help here, chaps. We're in a spot of bother," and the Americans were like, "Oh, spot of bother, you know? Oh, it's getting kind of a little bit warm over here, like something like that." But it's that typical British understated, where the Americans are like, well, if their position's about to get overrun and they're all going to die, they would have said, we're about to get overrun and we're all going to die. So they obviously don't need that artillery strike as much as these other chaps. And apparently that sort of was a regular problem between these two English-speaking places. So I can imagine what you're saying.
That's actually a very famous incident from the Korean War.
Is there? Is that that one I'm telling is from the Korean War, is it?
Right. It's from the Korean War. There's a British unit on a mountaintop defending, and they were about to be overrun by Chinese troops. And they said something, the communication. It's a bit touchy up here. When you can get around to helping us, it'd be good. And the Americans say, "Oh, I guess they're okay."
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a book called Outliers. I think if it's the top 5 books I would recommend for anyone in my worldview about epistemology and understanding of the world. It talks about a lot of different countries in there, but he actually talks about Asia quite a lot there. And he talks about why South Korea, the Korean Airlines, had the highest crash rate in the entire world. And he actually shows the transcripts of these things, and the way that the co-pilots were explaining things to the pilots, because the pilots have the seniority, so it's like you don't listen to the younger guy. He actually says it was safer whenever the junior pilot was flying, because he would listen to the actual captain. But he was like, those weather pads that we have are usually pretty good, like they're really helpful. And he should have just said, you need to do this right now. And because he didn't do that just right there, they actually wind up crashing and like everybody dying. So they had to amend that because the cultural was problem. So I totally get what you're saying, because sometimes here you'll see someone get into like a 5-minute conversation for something that would have taken an American like literally 10 to 20 seconds. And they're talking about, like, you just can't even understand that. Like, it's unbelievable.
It's funny. With these things, I always try to be really sort of ambivalent or magnanimous or something, and be like, oh, I can see value to both. And I absolutely can see value to a more respectful, values-based, or sort of relational, as you put it, Ben, way of talking. But I still end up with that one coming back to going, no, if it's going to make my conversations longer, less clear, and I might, as is the case that Isaiah is talking about, plow me and 180 passengers into the ground because I'm too scared to say we need to raise the flaps now. It's just, to me, it's like, no, it belongs to a certain time period, but no, we need to practice being more direct. It's not, this to me I'm struggling to find the benefits of that system.
It's worldview.
Yeah.
This is what I mean when I talk about worldview. Japan Airlines, actually, I don't know if this is about Korean Airlines, but Japan Airlines knew that they had a very serious issue. And so they analyzed it, and it was exactly what Isaiah was just saying, that the co-pilots, the navigators, didn't have the authority to tell the pilot or to push the point when they disagreed with the pilot. So the Japan Airlines they developed a training process to break this concern about how you speak to seniority, those seniors. They had to go through a whole training process to change the instinctual behavior of a people raised in a culture where you're always taught to defer to those who are older than you.
Right. I want to.
So it was.
Oh, sorry.
They improved their, their safety rate, but it was a major effort to do that.
I want to talk about one thing real quick, and then I want to let Scott get in there. You can ask one of these questions, Scott, that we have here. But so when I first got to South Korea, my first girlfriend, I'll never forget her, but I wind up making some comment like maybe this person's like in a nursing home, and she was like, "What's that?" And I was like, well, where like older people go, like to live, like with other older people.
When
she's
you
like,
get rid of your grandparents.
Yeah. She could not even comprehend it. She was like, well, why wouldn't they go live with the parents or with the children? And I was like, well, some people, they just don't want, like, because here it's actually considered like an honor to have your mother go and live with you her last days. And it's like, it's great because it's like built-in childcare. So, but she literally, her mind could not comprehend it. Right. So on one hand, you got to totally understand and appreciate the respect that they put on elders. But on the other hand, if you take a look at the ferry accident, which happened not too far from where I live right here, where the 300 people wind up drowning, literally the boat is sinking.
Yeah, it's like
and
you could hear like this, right? And they're going, stay in your rooms.
Yeah, just stay put. And oh God, it's so sad because you could see the kids and they're just sitting there and they're just listening, So I don't know, Harry, you're talking about finding a balance. I think that's a really good thing.
And it can
Scott, you want to ask one of these?
Yeah, I was just a more general question would be like, do you think that the two people, the peoples of North Korea, South Korea, want to be reunited? And if so, when might that happen? Like, how would that happen? When would it happen?
Well, when and how is anybody's guess. North Koreans have a religious imperative for unification. And the passion for unification is extremely strong in North Korea. South Koreans have very different attitudes based on generation. The older generation, the oldest generation that remembers the Korean War or immediately after that, feels like they have a strong desire for unification. There are some divided families still, people, but they're all very elderly. They have a burning desire for unification. The sort of in-between generation has sort of an in-between perspective on it. Yes, we really should be united as one nation, but it's not going to be easy. And then a younger generation is going to say, well, if we're trying to unite like Germany did or something like that, it's going to be a huge economic drain to us. And so they're not, they're kind of against it because of the economics. And then the younger generation just totally oblivious. To them, it, North Korea is North Korea. It's not part of Korea, and it's kind of meaningless. The reason why, so you've got a wide perspective of feelings about it. And an interesting thing in South Korean politics is that the distinction between the right and the left has less to do with social issues and less to do with economic policy than it has to do with North Korea policy.
Wow.
The conservatives want unification and the liberals don't. And that's basically the way it is. But the liberals also are very interested in helping the North or economically helping the North and things like that. And a lot of people think there's a lot of North Korean money in politics, in liberal politics in the South. I don't know about that, but that's a very strongly held opinion in the South. The reason why I say it's a religious imperative in the North is because of Kim Il-sung-ism sees Kim Il-sung, the leader, and his descendants as the head of the people, the head of the nation. And the nation is all Korean people.
Mm.
Now, in the equivalent of the State Department, Foreign Ministry in North Korea, there are different groups, different bureaus that deal with people from different countries. They have one bureau that deals with South Korea, another one that deals with overseas Koreans, and another one that deals with non-Koreans. So they distinguish between these three groups. South Koreans are captured by American ideology. They're puppets of the United States.
Yeah.
And they need to be liberated. Overseas Koreans are our compatriots that we need to embrace and bring back to be with us. And foreigners, non-Koreans, are just non-Koreans. You know, if they respect us, that's good. If they don't, well, we can deal with that. But they say that the leader is the head of the people. He's the father of the nation, or the parent of the nation. There's a Korean word, oboi, which literally means father, or it's drawn from abuji, which is a word for father, but it means parent. And he's the single parent for the whole nation. And until he, the leader, is actually ruling over all Korean people, he's not complete in himself. He's sort of an incomplete. There's an incompleteness about him. And so it's imperative that all Koreans come together under his leadership so that he is fully realized for what he's supposed to be.
So let me get in here. I would highly suggest one movie if you want to learn more about the Koreas. It's called JSA, Joint Security Area. And it's about this story because they have these checkpoints there on the border. It's the most fortified border in the world, but it's these stories about these people. They wind up befriending each other on both sides, but it's very powerful. It's an extremely I don't want to give away any spoilers, but if you are interested in it, I think it's on Netflix. So a couple things I want to say that like literally, as you talk about being ambivalent, I got really passionate about the North Korean issue. And one of my, many girlfriends that I had here, she's just like, do not, like literally I would tell her about the stuff I was doing with them. She's like, I don't want to hear a single thing. And actually, I like listening to North Korean music, and I sometimes play it, and my wife hears it. She absolutely hates it. She absolutely hates it. But one of the songs, well, because there's just bad feelings, because obviously you have like Kim Jong-il, they're constantly making threats. I mean, I remember when I got here, and I got so freaked out because and Kim Jong-il was in power at the time, but he was like, yeah, we're going to turn America into like a heaping pile of ash. And I was like, I was so scared. But when you get here, you'll understand. They just do that like every other week. It's just like, it's like an average Tuesday that they're issuing some kind of threat to South Korea. It's like, you don't even, like the first 20 times I took it seriously. If they say something now, I don't even think, you literally don't even think about it. But the point I wanted to say in that is, one of my favorite songs, it's called Donggil Muchige. Have you ever heard that song, by the way, Ben? It means reunification rainbow. And it's about like a rainbow.
I might have, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. It's about a rainbow that goes from both the Koreas that like connects them. So they're like, they're family, you know, it's a hard situation. They're brothers, they're cousins. They all have the same blood in them. But it's like North Korea is very strong about the reunification, but it's like, it's going to be under our terms. Like, you're going to adopt our system just exactly as what Ben said. So South Korea wants to see, from what I've seen, they want to see their reunification, but they've been realistic about it. They're like, if we are going to reunify, it has to be like a 20 or 30 year plan that we're doing. And the first thing we got to do is build up like the economy of North Korea. So it's not because literally it's like this right here. It's like South Koreans extremely rich, North Koreans are extremely poor. So they were working on some stuff. For example, I mean, they had this like joint tourist area that they'd built. It's called Gumgansan, which means Diamond Mountain. And then they had another area which is called Kaesong, which I also went there, where it's like not industrial complex where the South Koreans were providing like the technical power, and then the North Koreans were providing the manpower. But that totally wind up falling apart. But yeah, it's you got to be realistic. It's like, it'd be pretty dang difficult to have it done within the next 1 or 2 decades, because you have such, yeah.
So it's one of the main things that's making me think like I can understand what you're saying, Ben, about it sounds religious, because there's so many parts of this that seem religious. This idea of we've got a semi-undead leader, but then this like there is this Holy Land idea, a little bit like the sort of the issue of Israel. Like no, this is not a functional thing. We're not looking at economics here or resources or just the sort of nuts and bolts of everyday life. It is, because I was sitting there as both of you are thinking, what's in the average North Korean's head? Do they really think that South Koreans want to or would be willing to or sort of eagerly welcome them back? Do they still see themselves as one nation? And then after I listened to you speak, I thought that's not even really a question. It's like, it doesn't matter what they want. It is all of the one country, which just to me is a little bit like talking to the sort of Israeli about Palestinians. It's like, it doesn't matter who they are. This is our land. And it sort of makes it a much tougher thing if on the one side you've got that zealotry and on the other side going, well, there are some economic issues we need to work out. And, when it comes to sort of resources and things, let's, to take things slowly. It's like, no, why would we take God's will slowly? So do you think it will, like we're talking about sort of 20-year, 30-year, do you foresee?
All right. I believe, and this is a matter of faith on my part.
That's what that word rang in my mind.
The reason I'm in Korea is because I believe that God gave me a call to come to South Korea to prepare for the opening of North Korea. And I believe that it will.
Okay.
I also believe that there is, from God's point of view, a major requirement which needs to be fulfilled in the South. And that is for the divided South Korean church to come together in unity. Because if a divided church goes into North Korea, the North Koreans will get all the worst things of Christianity, the corruption, the manipulation, the money hunger, and all of these things. They will not, from my point of view, experience genuine Christianity. So we need in the South a major change, a major transformation to the Christian church in the South.
Is there precedent for churches unifying like that, though? Because every time I'm trying to think of any change in any religion, usually just causes further schisms. Like you're just sort of getting to the frayed ends of a blanket.
There are precedents, and the precedents are times of revival. Powerful. What we see is powerful movings of the Holy Spirit, and people have come together, and there have been movements to bring together. But what I'm talking about is not a formal association. There have been attempts throughout church history to bring about formal association of different denominations or different aspects of it. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a matter of the heart. And to change hearts requires something, a deeply spiritual, a very powerful, deep spiritual effort. I'm trying to think of how to say it, but and I believe it'll be a miracle. I really do believe that it will be a miracle. How it actually works out in terms of politics or economics or those things, I really don't know. And the time frame, I don't know the time frame either. I just figure God knows the time frame. He's given me a job to do to get ready for that time. Whether it's a matter of months or a matter of decades, that's not my concern. My concern is to help South Koreans come together with each other, and then also to gain a deeper understanding of the North, and to realize the differences in worldview, the differences in culture, the differences in language, and so that they're able to prepare for when it opens, however it opens. Practically speaking, I would say that there's more likelihood of, and this is one of the scenarios that a lot of people promote, is a federation of two separate states that have open borders, sort of like a common, like the European Union.
Yugoslavia.
Perhaps.
Australian.
Yeah, I don't know enough about Yugoslavia.
Australia was federated as a
but,
group of states.
And actually, there are political forces that are interested in bringing that about. In the U.S. and in Asia and in China, South Korea, some people are doing this. Other people have a perspective like what you just said, Isaiah, about the North Koreans see this as a religious imperative to come under the single leader. South Koreans, depending on their generation or their perspective, say, well, North Korea needs to become part of South Korea. They need to assimilate under our democratic rule.
I'm trying to figure
out
how could you have a federation? Like, to me, I imagine it would require an end to the Sung dynasty, and certainly along with that, an end to totalitarian or sort of authoritarian rule. You can't have a sort of democracy being like, what do you want, one person? We asked our multiple millions.
Yeah, it's hard to see it. It would require a massive change on the leadership's part themselves, or a removal of the figure, the single leader, and a rising up of some sort of collective leadership in the North. And every now and then you see some indication that that's a possibility. Other people say it's totally impossible. So you can spin different scenarios, and you can talk about how that's possible or how it's not possible.
Do you think war is really possible? Is there a possibility for war in the region?
I would say war is very, very low likelihood.
Okay.
North Korea is not interested in starting a war because they know that they would end up losing it. They would be destroyed.
Yeah.
South Korea is not interested in starting a war because they actually want to. It depends on the different, political parties in power, but they basically say, we want to bring North and South Korea together some way. And they also know that if there were a war, there would be a lot of damage done before it was over.
Right.
And North Korea could do a huge amount of damage to Seoul, to the
missiles,
the population concentration. Nobody wants that. But that's the threat. We'll make Seoul a sea of fire, and they have all of these rockets and artillery guns pointed at Seoul, and it's a reality. They could do it.
Because that's the thing I would worry about. I think democracies are safer when it comes to whether they go to war for silly reasons. Well, I say that now. America and Australia followed them into a sort of, we found some aluminium pipes and decided they were nukes. So maybe not. But I remember reading some analysis about North Korea that was saying some of what you've got to do as a dictator is sometimes fight wars just to keep the enemies within at bay. So if you have these generals vying for power, one way of cracking down is to sort of say, right, let's send off a nuke or something.
Well, there is always that kind of possibility of a scenario. I don't think it's very strong because the strength of the leadership and the cult of the leadership and the leadership in North Korea is not stupid. Now, there's sometimes different leaders, Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-un, say things that seem to be totally off the wall, but a lot of that is intentional. And they're very, very smart. And they're smart enough to know that if they were to bombard Seoul and kill a lot of people, then everything that's holding back the retaliation now, all of that would be pulled away.
Right.
It wouldn't last.
Yeah.
So they know that. Now, there have been times where things were getting so touchy between the North and the South. And that people were concerned that there might be a mistake. Somebody might do something by mistake. And that may well be the biggest issue. In the last decade or two, I would say that that possibility has, the likelihood of that has gone down a lot, because you're getting less idealism on both sides among the leadership at the top levels, and more of a realpolitik, understanding. We've got to do this. And the leadership is, don't necessarily believe their own propaganda.
Right, of course.
So there's, again, you can spin all these different scenarios very easily. And for me, it comes back to my belief in what God has called me to do and what he's indicated to me. So, that also rules out, if you will. It's an act of faith on my part, but it rules out a belief that there will be a war. But practically, realistically speaking, I see war as being very, very low possibility.
You know what? So technically speaking, they are still at war right now. And actually, because they only have an armistice signed. That was one thing that Kim Jong-un was trying to get undone, meeting with Donald Trump. And as much as I disliked virtually everything that Donald Trump did, I got to give mad props for at least trying to broker peace there. Now, he was totally outclassed. He was totally out of his league. He was totally naive to think that he could go and meet Kim Jong-un and that it wouldn't be anything other than like a photo op or an ability for them to try to get some kind of concessions, because that's really all it was. So because of the fact, and I've heard this too, he was saying like, oh, I'll just meet him and I'll just arrange everything and I don't need to be prepared or anything like that. That was a bit of the hubris and the narcissism coming out. But that being said, I do got to say, at least he tried. At least that's worth something in my book. Even if it was idiotic in the way that he did it, he made multiple efforts. Even coming to South Korea, that was like a big deal. And actually crossing there. Actually, I have one more question, because he did meet him at the border. But this last question I want to ask you is, and I want to preface this by telling you a little something, because the gospel was trying to penetrate South Korea, and before North Korea was called the Hermit Kingdom, which is what it's called now, like just Korea in general was called the Hermit Kingdom, because the fact that they've been abused a lot by Japan and by China for thousands of years. And so that's kind of just makes them naturally afraid of foreigners, right? That they kind of just have this, well, we've been abused so much. So when America was trying to come here, they were very standoffish, and they actually killed some of the missionaries here. But amazingly, a revival broke out in 2007 in
1907.
1907. Did I say 2000? 1907. 2007 was the, God, that would have actually got aired if you didn't correct me. Thank you so much. In 1907, a revival broke out in North Korea, inside of North Korea, and in the capital. And the capital became known as the Jerusalem of the East. It's so amazing when you hear the stories that came out of there, people repenting and how people were confessing their sins, and how they were actually, it was like starting to affect economies like bars, and I mean, so many things. It's such an amazing story if you do the research on that. But that being said, and this is where the question comes in, is it is the biggest irony that the spot where the gospel broke out is now the capital of an atheistic government. I know there's a little bit of you might say that there's some religion in the ideology, but they themselves, the Kim Il-sung was himself an atheist, and as you're talking about, his mom was a Christian, and I think his grandfather was a missionary as well. So what influence do you think that like atheism has on their government, and as far as that being something that's like a spiritual element, because unfortunately, if you're an atheist, you don't believe that you believe in hardcore materialism. You don't recognize that there is a, as Christians, as believers do, that there is a spiritual element to what's going on here. And I don't think that's so clearly demonstrated as in North Korea, where you could have the gospel penetrate someplace and then it abruptly turns into like the capital of atheism. And so there's some spiritual elements that are going on here, spiritual forces. So I was wondering if you could just speak to that, Ben.
Okay. The Pyongyang revival was world famous. It's still very strong, very important a point in the history of the Korean Church, and it ended up with the Pyongyang being called the Jerusalem of the East because people went out from there all over to start churches, and there were seminaries, and there was a lot of stuff there. There are a variety of issues, and it's, we could go into, I could talk on this for a few hours actually about the different kinds of issues and why communism rose in the north and not in the south, and so on and so forth. Kim Il-sung himself was raised as a Christian, and when he was in his 20s, he actually lived with a Methodist pastor in Manchuria and was pianist for a church, and worked with young people on doing dramatic productions and things like that. So he knew his Bible very well.
That explains so much.
You can see that reflected in the design of Kim Il-sung-ism.
Yeah, right.
It is based on Christian patterns.
Hey, 1 second.
All the way through.
1 second. I want to let you get back to that, but this is the reason why I fight for reunification, because for this little half Korean daughter, I want her to be able to see where her ancestors roamed in North Korea, so she can say she can say that she's gone there. So anyway, please continue. I'm sorry. Yeah, say annyeong. Okay, go ahead. Sorry. Annyeong means hi. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to say hi before she goes.
That's
please,
okay.
Please continue.
So anyway, Kim Il-sung had a Christian education.
A lot of the pageantry of the North is very similar, to a church kind of service with music and theater and all of that stuff.
North Korean atheism is really not atheism, it's materialism. A very strong sense of, this is Marxism, dialectic materialism, the denial of a metaphysical or a spiritual reality, but they have replaced it with a strong sense of a political, quasi-spiritual reality. That's the issue. It's not, in my mind, it's not atheism so much as a worldview that, in a sense, is atheistic. Doesn't believe in a creator, doesn't believe in a God that rules over all things. Or one of the fundamental tenets of biblical Christianity is that we are creatures of a God who created us out of love, but also gave us a moral code to live by. And it is not based on enlightened self-interest. It is decreed by God. And that in the North, there is nothing like that. What there is instead is the decree of the leader. They have a constitution, they have laws and everything else, but none of them mean anything because the leader is free to change things by decree. So he is a God, he functions as a God in that way. And North Korean morality is based on what the leader proclaims.
I think in that case, it's in how we're defining God, right? So like for atheists, especially in the West, would look at them as not atheists at all. They may call themselves atheists, but anytime your leader is a God, or you're defining God as this political immorality or whatever it is. It's just another definition of theism that they're holding on to.
Mm.
And
And
that's
that's
why
exactly why I say That's exactly why I say North Korea is one of the most religious countries in the world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in my mind.
absolutely. Absolutely.
I just wanted to ask something, because this is reminding me of something you'd said before about the people going to church, and if they look like they start believing too much, it was your friend's view that they sort of got yoinked out of there. I imagine for anybody who gets to any kind of standing within North Korean society, there is a kind of it reminds me of doublethink from 1984, where you would have to become aware of the duality of things, that it is this, but we say it's that, and that if you start saying things are what they are, that's going to be a problem. Is that the case, or am I getting the wrong idea there?
Things have changed in the last 10 years or so, because there's been a lot of leakage, a lot of people traveling back and forth between China, defectors coming to South Korea and sending money back to and talking to family in North Korea, and just a bunch of stuff like that. But Professor Kim, this is what he said when he was in the leadership in North Korea. It was about the time of the 88 Olympics. It was 88 or 89. North Korea staged an international athletic event. They were excluded from the Olympics, so they had their own Olympics. And they had a lot of foreigners coming and a lot of reporters and people coming. And Professor Kim and his family were among the elite. And so the North Koreans were going to bring a bunch of foreign Western reporters around to see a normal Korean family. And so before they came, the authorities came to Professor Kim's house, and he says, here's some beef, and here's the stuff to make bulgogi, a beef dish. It's traditional Korean beef dish. They'd never made it. They didn't even know how to cook it. But they were given instructions, and they were told what to do, and they were given the ingredients. And they said, we want you to cook it, and we want you to be eating it when we bring the reporters by. And so they did. And then as soon as the group were left, the officials came and took everything back.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
It was all staged.
But
here is
the point.
Yeah.
This is the point. Professor Kim said they thought that was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So
they believed it was right.
So they were aware that they were aware that the intent of that was to deceive these people externally, but they were like, it's a good deception.
That's right. It was the right thing to do.
Right.
I
just struggle to
that's how deep.
I just struggle to how you could think about that. I guess what it is sort of going, oh, we want them to be jealous of us because we know life is really great here in North Korea. And sure, I don't have beef much, but yeah, I guess you could square it. You can square any circle if you put your mind to it.
Because it gave honor to the leader. That was the highest imperative.
Sorry.
Of course, yeah. Well said.
That
makes sense.
This so reminds me of Nicolae Ceausescu in Romania, how they used to have these like banquet style like photo ops, and they would actually be using like wooden food. So it looked all beautiful. And I'm probably sure you did not see this movie, Ben, because it's extremely raunchy. But the interview, you probably never saw that movie, correct?
No, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, do not watch it. It's extremely graphic and extremely lewd. But they wind up going to North Korea to assassinate, and they do assassinate Kim Jong-un.
Yeah.
But one of the scenes in there, it's causing a cognitive dissonance for one of the guys, because he's trying to believe in the best in Kim Jong-un, and he's like really starting to like him as a friend. And one of the things that they do though is they drive him by a shop, and it looks like all this food is there, and there's a fat kid eating a lollipop there, and it turns out it's just a painting. Like later on he walks by and he sees that it's just a painting, but they're doing this for the photo ops of saying, hey, we have some fat kids who like to eat candy here. And so he winds up realizing this later on, that this is just some giant show, that they're putting on. But we could probably talk another couple of hours on this topic alone. So I think we might have to do a round two, because I never like to inundate any one topic or inundate people who are listening. Like I don't like to do that. I like to break things up and to try to give things into bite-sized pieces to where people can digest them and take time to think about it. But I really want to just, if anyone has any last thoughts here, and then I also want to give you a chance to plug whatever it is that you're doing, your websites or whatever. So Scott, do you have any last thoughts, bro?
No, just really interesting conversation. I mean, North Korea is definitely one of those mystery countries, one of those really fascinating, mysterious worlds that I can only imagine, and a lot of people talk about, and there's so much mythology probably surrounding it. So it's really interesting to hear your perspective, Ben, from being there,
Should also plug
And studying it.
yes, yeah. So thank you very, very much for that. This has been fascinating. Really interesting to get that perspective from somebody who's actually been there. And so I should also share your website, which is, this is yours, isn't it? The Fourth River.
That's right.
So do you want to tell us a bit about what this is?
It's actually not well maintained. I managed to keep a little bit up to date on a month-to-month basis, but we really need to redesign the whole thing. But
that's where I'm coming in. That's where I'm coming in. That's what I do. That's what I do.
I call it a knowledge base because I've tried to put out there a lot of information about North Korea. And that's the thing that I haven't been able to maintain just because I've been so busy. But there's the stuff about economics, the stuff about socialism. There's some very interesting papers that different people have written, but a lot of that is very much dated. But anybody is welcome to take a look at it. I also publish a prayer calendar, and what it is, it's a calendar. Each day of the month is a square, and there's a prayer item on there, and then I send that out at the beginning of the month by email, and along with a newsletter. And the first part of the newsletter is about North Korea. It's the situation in the North. And as I've reviewed the news and gotten stuff, it's about it's a few paragraphs, and a lot of people have expressed a lot of appreciation of that. And then that's followed by some information about what we're doing and what's happening in terms of our work here. So, and that's available to anybody who sends me their email address.
All right. And what's your email so we could put it up here?
Okay, Ben Torrey, BenTorrey at thefourthriver.org. It's all spelled out as one word.
We'll make all the links available.
Yeah.
Hey, it's amazing is I actually got to meet, well, I shouldn't call this amazing. I just happened to meet Kim Jong-un while I was there because they were opening up some this new area for the how do you call it? They were opening up a new area for the tourists, and he just happened to be doing some. So Harry, you got a picture of that? Yeah, there you go.
Wow.
Isn't that the guy?
It's fake, Scott.
Yeah, it's fake.
Scott,
Wow.
Scott,
That's that guy that did the Olympics, wasn't it? He was he was visiting places.
Look at Scott's face. That guy actually showed up at the Olympics, and then he went in and was saying hi to. He was trolling the North Korean cheerleaders, and they made him leave there. So actually, can you put up the other picture? I showed the other picture where I had a whole. They make you wear that thing. And every time, if you don't wear it, they'll fine you $50. They try to fine you $50 for everything. If you spit or if you try to take a rock or something like that. As communistic as they were trying to get money any and every way they possibly could out of you. So
I would love that. Just go there with a pocket full of 50s and be like, I'd like another $50 rock. Thank you. There you go.
Seriously. Actually, someone from my hometown, his name is Matthew Miller. He went to North Korea, ripped up his passport at the airport, and they wind up putting him in prison for some time. I don't know how long it was, but it wasn't like that Ottoman guy, that Otto whatever, because he wind up getting out later on.
Right.
Otto,
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Was that
So-
just for
so I-
ripping up his? I thought it was for stealing a communist poster.
No.
Well, that's
The
what
Otto
that's
guy.
what Warmbier tried to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what Otto
Mhm.
did. That's what Otto did. This guy just got to the airport and then he ripped it up and he's like, "Oh, I want to live here." But then they're like, this you have a really bad idea about what's going on here because you know what I mean? They wanted to I guess they saw this as like some kind of stunt he was doing or whatever. They wound up throwing him in prison, but he got out. But anyway, the last thoughts I want to say is Scott, you had made I saw a post we were communicating and you had mentioned something about Jim Jones and I told you like if you study anything about Jim Jones you will learn this guy was not a Christian. Like he went to church as a kid and he saw this is powerful. In fact, I can almost think of nothing I can almost think of nothing that is more powerful than this idea of religion that can totally encapsulate people's imagination and like and control people. So religion definitely does have some elements in it that can be very abusive, you know. But also, someone like Kim Il Sung can see it as well and say, "I can use this. Like, there's utility in this to try to control people," and that's very dangerous. You know, that's very dangerous whenever you want to use something such as religion that should be very personal, very sacred, and whenever you're trying to abuse it for whatever way. And I'm talking about it could be you know politically, it could be inside of your own life to attack others, to hurt others, and that's not the faith I want to use. I'm sure that's not the faith that Ben has, where we want to use our religion to do that. So I really want to thank you for the opportunity to interview you, and I mean I thought I've studied a lot, like I mean a lot about North Korea, and some of the stuff you said because I've never met anyone who's actually lived there. So some of the stuff you said, like you took this in areas that I had no idea about. So I really want to thank you for that. So maybe we'll have to do a round two because I still have probably another 2 hours of questions to ask you.
Thank you everyone for joining us, for Scott and Isaiah on the panel, and thank you very much, Ben, for sharing your experience on that. That was super. It's really interesting. So thank you very much for sparing the time.
Welcome.
Make sure you subscribe. Scott, do you have a channel?
Not right now. I just finished doing a show with Borg Skeptic called Exploring Epistemology. I might pick that back up though soon.
Cool. All right.
God, you don't have a channel?
I'll let you know.
Well, we'll put links.
God, you don't have a
there.
channel? Well,
No,
I don't count.
Isaiah's
Oh
from,
yeah, of course.
from Empathy
God,
Respect,
Scott, my
which
God.
I'll share links with, and I'll also put Ben's website in the description. So if you're interested in it, get involved.
Scott's coming on with my channel. It's RHE Podcast. I'm just an inside joke there.
Right.
But yeah, Scott, I really appreciate Scott's feedback. Yeah, thank you very much. RHE Podcast. You can look us up: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Spotify, all that, and or rhepodcast.com, rhepodcast@gmail.com. If you have any questions, would like to come on as a guest, something you'd like to see us talk about, yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate it.